This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. If you're watching or listening to MacVoices, the odds are that you like to learn, not just about Macs and iPhones and iPads, but also everything associated with them. Programming, productivity, design, web publishing, audio production, video production, and more. And that's why I'm proud to have lynda.com as a sponsor of MacVoices. First, there's the fact that lynda.com gives you access to over 3,000 titles that people the world over are using to get better at what they do, or get started with things they want to learn. Second, lynda.com lets you watch and learn what you want, where you want, when you want, because they support the Mac, iPhone, and iPad, along with many other devices. By combining those first two, you get to watch and learn at your own pace. If you need to watch something 3 or 4 times to get it, then you watch it 3 or 4 times. And to find out just how great that is, you can go right now to lynda.com/MacVoices and sign up for a 10-day free trial. That's not a limited play, few courses kind of trial. That's a full trial of any and every single video on lynda.com. The full video, not just the introduction. With your free trial, you can learn all about iOS 8, or complete several courses on digital photography, or learn more than you ever thought you would know about Excel or Photoshop. Or step outside the tech realm and learn more about investing in finance, or work-life balance. You pick the topic, and lynda.com has you covered. And all that in the trial period. Think what you can do once you become a lynda.com subscriber. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Visit lynda.com/MacVoices right now for a free, full, unlimited 10-day trial and learn something new. Go ahead. I challenge you to learn something new in 2015. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of MacVoices. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is a MacVoices briefing on Downcast, the podcast application for the Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Downcast is my preferred podcast application, period. I've tried others, used others for an extended period of time, but with each release of Downcast, there are many more features that I really use and that are important to me. There are also 2 particular decisions the Downcast developers made that are deal breakers for me for so many other podcast applications, notably Marco Arment's highly regarded Overcast. First, Downcast supports both audio and video podcasts, and second, has versions available for the Mac, iPhone, and iPad. I recognize the challenges of trying to support video for many of the features, and the challenges of doing multiple versions can be a burden. But I really don't want to make my podcast management all the more complex by having one app for audio, one for video, one that runs only on iOS, and another that runs on the Mac. For me, it just isn't worth the hassle, especially since I go from device to device for podcast consumption. So why not use iTunes? Unfortunately, for some time now, the podcast support in iTunes has been a bit lacking for anyone who listens to podcasts on more than a casual basis. Lost subscriptions, spotty syncing between Mac and iOS devices, and more sent me looking for something better a long time ago. Like all podcatchers, the cool name for applications that let you subscribe and listen to or watch podcasts, Downcast does just that. It's separate from iTunes, so you'll either need to resubscribe to your preferred podcasts within the app itself, or export the subscriptions from that other podcatcher you've been using. Most of the podcatchers make that pretty easy. Just find the Export Settings button, and you'll end up with an OPML file that you can import into Downcast, and all your subscriptions will be intact. Though, if you had shows you hadn't listened to yet, you may have to go back and re-download them individually. By default, Downcast grabs only the latest episode. A special note to iTunes users, especially iTunes 12 users. If you're using an earlier version of iTunes, you may be able to control-click on podcasts in your sidebar and export your subscriptions. If you're up to iTunes 12, however, I've been unable to find a way to do this, so you'll have to go the manual route. The downside is that it's a little time-intensive. The upside is that it's a good opportunity to prune your podcast list down to what you really listen to and get rid of the subscriptions that may be chewing up space on your device. The end result is well worth the effort, since you'll have so many more features and options going forward. So those are some of the basics to get you started. Now, let's get to what's great about Downcast. Syncing. Downcast uses iCloud to sync podcast subscriptions, and I found it to be very reliable. The only hiccup I had was when I had my iOS device upgraded to iOS 8, but hadn't upgraded my Mac yet to Yosemite. Once I turned on iCloud Drive and did the Yosemite upgrade, everything smoothed back out and my subscriptions and episodes played and synced like they're supposed to. Interface. One brilliant move on the developer's part was making a consistent, if different, interface for the Mac, iPad, and iPhone. The benefits and limitations of each device's screen size are addressed effectively, making for a consistent, if slightly different, view on your podcasts. For example, with their larger screens, the Mac and iPad interface share the same two-pane view of your subscriptions. Podcasts on the left, individual episodes for the selected podcast on the right. The iPhone, even the iPhone 6 Plus, just shows the list of podcasts, then moves right to show individual episodes, and right again to play the individual episodes. But, because they're both touch interfaces, the iPhone and iPad versions share many gesture commands, like a pull-down on the list of podcasts to refresh, where the Mac version has a dedicated icon for that function. It all just makes sense. While some podcatchers pride themselves on their super clean interfaces, especially for playing, I prefer having the most used controls available to me, and not just play, pause, and stop. The inclusion of continuous play, two different skip forward and skip backward buttons that are configurable in duration, playback speed, time played, and the time remaining indicators make playing the podcast the way I want simple. The number of those controls is, once again, dependent on which device you're using, but I've always found that the appropriate ones are right there when I want them, where I want them. Playback speed. As a podcast producer, I'm not necessarily thrilled with double or triple speed playback, simply because every single word uttered on every single show is supposed to be sacred and golden. As a podcast consumer, however, I treasure variable playback options, and Downcast has plenty. I keep up with over 60 different shows that range from tech to business to entertainment, and the only way that's possible is listening to some at 1.5x or 2x speed. Downcast recently updated those options to include new speeds of 2.25x, 2.5x, 2.75x. That makes it easier to train yourself to listen at faster speeds because you can work your way up slowly. The jump from 1x to 1.5x is pretty easy to make. To get to 2x is a bit tougher. After that, you definitely need practice, and Downcast gives you the option. As a side note, don't expect to be able to standardize on listening at a given speed, no matter how much you train. So much depends on the sound of the voices involved, the quality of the recording, and the speed at which some people speak. And of course, your own desire to savor or absorb the information being delivered. There are some shows I listen to only at 2.5x, others only at 1x. Find the speed that works for you for each of your podcasts, and enjoy. And also a word about video playback at high speeds. Downcast can handle playing back videos at up to 2x speed and will keep the video in sync, so that it ends up looking something like an old-time movie. Go above 2x, and Downcast will skip frames, giving you more of a slideshow stop-motion experience. The audio will play back just fine at the requested speed, the video just won't speed up accordingly. Settings and options. Downcast provides all sorts of options to control podcast playback and management. Settings can be assigned globally and then overridden for individual podcasts. Feed refreshes can be done based on Wi-Fi or cellular, on a schedule, or by location. The number of episodes per podcast to download or keep can be set. There are options for continuous play, streaming playback, and even gestures. In short, pretty much any control or setting you want or need is probably there, and with granular control. Or you can just use the defaults and tweak only what you need. One last feature that's really handy is, when playing a podcast on your iPhone, the entire iPhone screen becomes a toggle to pause or play. If you're trying to manipulate your phone in the car without looking at the screen, it's much easier to tap anywhere on the screen rather than trying to hit a small pause or play control. There's a lot to like about Downcast, and I'd encourage you to give it a try if you're a serious podcast listener or are frustrated with iTunes as a podcatcher. You can find the iOS versions that run on both the iPhone and iPad on the App Store for $2.99, and the Mac version is on the Mac App Store for $9.99. So for about $13 total, you get a suite of applications that keep your podcasts synced across all your Mac and iDevices and give you pretty much any control or option you want for playback and enjoyment. That's the MacVoices briefing on Downcast, my podcast application of choice. I hope you'll continue to join me here on MacVoices. There's lots more coming soon. And if you decide to try Downcast, let me know what you think. You can drop me an email at chuck@macvoices.com, or I'm on Twitter as @ChuckJoyner. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.